From Music for All and presented by Yamaha, it's Mind the Gap, a practical podcast series for young and future music educators. Tonight on the program, Associate Professor of Music at Lake Forest College in Illinois, Dr. Scott Edgar, licensed and American Board of Radiology certified medical physicist from Texas, Tim Ochran, retired director of bands at Lassiter High School in Georgia, Alfred Watkins. Our conversation moderated by Susan Smith and David Starnes. Please welcome Susan Smith and David Starnes.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Season 2, Episode 3 of Mind the Gap. We hope everyone's doing well tonight. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, thank you. If you're joining us via podcast, we hope you enjoy this, and we'll share this and archive this for future reference, whether you're a music educator or a professor, and use this information to your benefit down the road. Tonight's episode is entitled Educator and Student Self-Wellness, Nurturing the Mind, Body, and Spirit. And as we know, we've just come out of a historic year of doing a lot of things a lot different in terms of teaching, particularly from the standpoint of music education and how Ensemble works in a virtual world. And this is really a reflection of that and how we're dealing with students coming back face to face. My real job is director of orchestras at Kennesaw Mountain High School, and I actually serve as an education consultant at Music for All. But I'm right there with so many educators in my 33rd year of teaching that we are now dealing with the after effects of what this looks like, not only for students and parents, but how we feel as educators, because it's a completely different sensation, and it's a thing that for most of us, it's wearing us out as far as trying to get students back on that track again. So you might wonder why we picked the panel that we did tonight, and we hope that will reveal itself as we continue through this episode this evening. My counterpart, my dear friend, Susan Smith, I'd like to pass off to her, and she's going to provide welcome and a little intro of herself, and then introduce our panelists. So Susan.
Thank you, David. This is the first time we've been together since we started our second season here. We were together so much at the beginning. It's been an exciting time for sure. Well, we're so thrilled to have such a wonderful panel with us tonight. As David said, you know, we've all been kind of dealing with the after effects of the pandemic and all the things that have happened with our students and as other teachers. Myself, I'm a professor or a lecturer in music education at Troy University, so I have the opportunity to see students every day and the effects that are having, and also the clientele, the people that we are really speaking to in terms of going out there and being teachers. I am also an educational consultant for Music for All, and also have the opportunity to be the chair of the Collegiate Advisory Council for NAFME. As David mentioned, we have wonderful panelists with us this evening. I want to start with, we won't go age before beauty, I guess, but for sure the distinguished Mr. Alfred Watkins is with us. Alfred, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little of your huge career that you've had.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, David, for inviting me to participate tonight, and I look forward to the visit. My name is Alfred Watkins. I was director of bands at Lassiter High School in Georgia, in Marietta, Georgia, just north of Atlanta for 31 of my 37 years teaching. And I currently lead an all-adult community band, the Cobb Symphony. We just went through a year and a half away from each other. So I'm kind of still in the class from what I deal with music from an adult standpoint. And I'm the founder of the Minority Band Directors National Association, a collection of 2,000 ethnic minority band directors. And so I keep my hands and keep in touch with everything that's happening as much as I can in that community.
Thank you so much, Alfred. And thank you so much for continuing to give back to what it is we all are trying to do every day. Someone you might know in a different format, Tim Ochran, I think just got off the judging field in Texas. And many of us know him from DCI and Bands of America and all that he's given to the adjudicating community. But he's here in a different capacity this evening. Tim, welcome. Tell us a little bit about what you do in your real life.
Well, thanks, Susan. I made the choice a long time ago that there are so many great musicians out there that science was my field. So I'm a high energy particle physicist. And when I made that choice and left the Youth Symphony in Pittsburgh, I joined a drum corps and got hooked on marching band. And for the last 35 years, I've been judging the activity. And my longest friends are in the activity. Came from a musical family. So it's just been that that piece, looking forward to the conversation. And especially as I look around, and that we have new people that come into the activity, and geez, if I had only known what I know now back then, would things be different? And just as we take care of the kids, and especially today's thing about, I just spent the last 2 years running a major medical center 24/7 for COVID for nearly 2 years, sleeping in my office most of the time, COVID patients down the way, and still doing activities like we're talking about tonight for the standpoint of drum corps. And as we've gotten older, and I'm looking forward to some of the conversations, because I've known David since he was a marching member of a drum corps that I didn't really care for at the time, because they beat our drum corps. But we've been friends, even though for the longest time. So looking forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks for being here. And someone that has been on the scene, but I think that we have all seen much more of, and we're thankful for his contributions over the last couple of years. Mr. Scott Edgar, Dr. Scott Edgar, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And we'll get started with you this evening.
Oh, Susan, David, thank you. Music for All, always a pleasure. So one of the other series at Music for All, teaching social and emotional learning through music, I have the honor of hosting that. So it's actually great to be on the other side of things. I like being on this side too. So thank you for being able to do that. I'm associate professor of music at Lake Forest College, just north of Chicago. I'm director of bands there. And I'm also Director of Research and Practice for the Center for Arts Education and Social and Emotional Learning. How many hats can we wear, right?
I was just about to say, that's what we do, right? We keep those plates spinning for sure. And Scott, we're going to start with you this evening and ask you a little bit just about in terms of the student perspective and well-being. I know we have some college students on with us this evening and also watching on Facebook Live, but we deal with students of all ranges, types and ages, and kind of where we are right now and how we kind of engage those students with different personality types and maybe a little bit of boots on the ground advice you might have for us.
Yeah, and I think that the teachers who are finding the most connection with students right now are realizing that there has been a profound developmental loss here, that our fourth graders are really developmentally second graders, that our seventh graders are really fourth graders, and our high schoolers who are juniors and seniors have never had somebody model for them what it's like to be a junior or a senior. They're being thrown into the deep end and asking to serve a role that they've never been scaffolded up to fill. So this is why, when we use the words like after effect of the pandemic, I think that I agree that we're starting to navigate on the end of the physical side, but we are left with a residue right now that we're seeing tangibly in the classroom every single day. And that's the mental health crisis that's going to be coming with us for years, if not a decade. And those are manifesting in ways of unpredictable behavior, finding ways that we're struggling to be resilient. It's the little things that become mountains. We've all been through so much in terms of trauma. And, in terms of my definition of trauma, it's a strong emotion that gets stuck in the brain. And oftentimes, it's our job to try to unstick that. But unintentionally in the classroom, we're going to have a trigger. And we're going to say, hey, Johnny's never reacted that way. Well, that reaction is because they've been triggered and that trauma's coming through. So all of our students right now are doing their best. All of our teachers right now are doing their best. But we're dealing with half a deck, and we're dealing with a deck that is really, really sticky because of where it's come from.
We ask teachers, obviously, to do so much. And now with this additional layer of being able to recognize those things in students and have the appropriate response, as opposed to just dismissing something or missing that cue. Any thoughts on that, on how to recognize those moving forward?
Yeah, so I do an activity with a lot of my students, and it's called an emotion iceberg. And the emotion that we see, the reaction that we see, the response that we see is just the tip. It's the part that's sticking up out of the water. And there's so much lying underneath that is from, could be as simple in the pre-pandemic days, it's because you didn't have breakfast, or you might have had a fight with your significant other, or there was something that just wasn't happening where a need wasn't being fulfilled in your life. But to get at this in a classroom, I don't think it's a bad use of time to say, when we see frustration, when we see joy, when we see anger, when we see happiness, what are some things that are underneath the water? And when we start to normalize this type of discussion with our students, we start to normalize this discussion with our teacher colleagues. Because let's just own it. I'm in the classroom every single day. I have my own ensemble, working with teachers just like you are, Susan. And you know what? I am more tired now than I've ever been. And there are a lot of reasons for that I'm still wrapping my head around why I'm exhausted. But the reason is, for me, it's just that I'm shooting from the hip every day of the week and twice on Sunday because I don't know what's coming. And that unpredictability is what is just exhausting me the most.
Absolutely. We've had to develop our curriculum and look at it in a different way. Through the pandemic, I said, now we're really learning that we don't actually teach the title of our classes, right? We're not band teachers, we're music teachers. And how we kind of morph that curriculum to continue to do that and meet the needs of the individual student while still taking on what we feel like are these, Tim, you were just talking about judging in Texas. Those groups haven't lost a step for sure. But as I watch many of them, a lot of teachers are trying to put on parameters and structures on students that they're just not really ready for. And how do we make that transition from what we were doing at home to making it viable in the classroom? Any thoughts on that?
You know what was so powerful about what you just said? And Tim, you said you were just down there judging 6A and we're gearing up for Grand Nationals this weekend. I think that's what we've missed the most. So, in the past where the rehearsal and we had those mid-October lulls and it was like, how are we going to fight through? It was like, we get to come together and do this. How cool is this? It was cathartic to be able to go through that because we've missed that so much. The challenges that we've had through the pandemic, teaching remotely, teaching over the computer, it's like, yeah, even if we did the stitching of the ensemble, that wasn't what we craved. We craved coming together, building trust, and having community. And when we were able to get together and do that this year, that was the salve. One of my catchphrases that I use is that our number one job in education right now is to lead our students from trauma to trust. And I believe that the most powerful way that we can do that is the same way that we always have done this. And Susan, I know we're going to talk a little bit about different personality types and how do we recognize that in students. But the challenge is that, let's just own it, music privileges extroverts. It privileges people who like to put themselves out there. Other subjects, you can be fairly solitary. If you're working in your calculus class, it can be pencil, paper, teacher. Music, we can't play by that rule. So as we're building a conducive space for belonging, where our students are able to feel safe and brave, that's the type of trust that we need. And I firmly believe that the number one antidote for trauma is trust.
I think you just hit on I want to jump in. I think you just hit on it. It's that community aspect. It's that belonging. And I think that's been one of the psychological aspects of the pandemic is it has isolated all of us. It has put us behind a screen, isolated from everyone else. And that for those, and I am truly not an extrovert and truly an introvert. It was a perfect time for me. My life actually got better because I didn't have to deal with the people I really didn't want to deal with. But really, that's the thing of where folks have really changed is that they've gone into that isolation mode. And it's the lobster in the pot, the water boiled very slowly for the last 18 months, that their reality of what really, a contact with somebody really is. And all you have to do is go into a room and try to make eye contact with someone because they've looked at a screen. They've not made eye contact. They've either looked at a camera or looked at a screen and they've never had that eye contact for 18 months. So that's a really difficult thing to get things back together from being able to have that association, with not only one-on-one, but within a group.
Absolutely. So Scott, you mentioned the personality types. Let's jump into there and the kinds of things that we can use, the strategies that we can use to reach students of different personality types.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Tim just said it better than I ever could. It's that we have different personality types in our classroom. And I think the last 18 months has done nothing but made those extremes. I used to be the extrovert of extroverts and, put me in the middle of a party and yeah, I'm comfortable, let's go. And I'm not there anymore. That's I think fundamentally some of our personality types have changed. So I think that's why as students and our colleagues and our friends and our family are coming back to our space and it's like I don't know if I recognize. Well, right, because so many of us have undergone fundamental personality changes through what we've had to go through. So, I think a lot of empathy and grace for that. And, we said, oh, well, Johnny was our, gonna be drum major, ready to go, put them out there, and might not be the same kid. We understand how development works. And the last 18 months have affected what, I hate to use the word typical, but are the type of development that we've been used to. So that's been either arrested or changed or morphed. And all of that put together just positions us to a space as typically ensemble directors or future ensemble directors of saying how the group's going to interact is going to fundamentally be different. We have people who enjoy being last chair trumpet, that they just want to come in and they just want to have their instrument and their music and not make a splash, but do their job, and they love band as much as anybody else. And we need them. The trick here is just to say that our job as teachers is to say every single kid in my ensemble, our ensemble, every single one in our ensemble is valued, no matter what you're bringing, and understanding that now more than ever, what students contribute to the ensemble is not as important as what music's going to do for their lives. So the world that I'm living in right now is really looking at how can music serve as a space to help our students rebuild some of these life skills, whether it be resilience, whether it be emotional recognition, whether it be self-reflection. So some of our students just need some targeted time to get their feet back under them, and that might be different than what we expect. From a musical perspective, some of them thrive. Tim, you said, you thrived during the pandemic. You got to choose your socialization. Some of our students took off like none other during the pandemic because they were left to their own devices, and they've skyrocketed in terms of their musicianship. Other students may be a hair, I'll use the word embarrassed, that they didn't get better. So no matter what they're bringing into the classroom, that's right. That is the space where they need to be. And then it's put me in, coach. I'm the music teacher. Let's go.
I think that idea of resiliency and being able to communicate their emotions, I think, is something that's really necessary right now. And as ensemble conductors, sometimes it can be difficult to know that taking the time to be able to talk about those things is important right now, because we still have the same stresses. We still have the same, the football games happening, or the MPA maybe is happening, and how we take the time for that and have those kinds of discussions. The students that Alfred taught and that David teaches now, it's different. They're still kids. So just trying to help lead them to where we want them to be, and where we know that they can be the best that they can be in terms of musicians, is something that's obviously, kind of a challenge right now, and something that we all have on our minds.
And, this is that really fine line. And if anyone has the magic answer, please tell me. It's the difference that, we're talking about empathy and grace, right? How do we have empathy and grace? But how do you balance empathy and grace with rigor? Because some of our students need that rigor. Some of those students need that push. And that's that individualized instruction. I think oftentimes where I'm finding my mind go, whether it's in front of the wind ensemble or going out and working with high school students, is that oftentimes we relegate ourselves to fixers, right? We fix notes, we fix rhythms, and the end all be all is correct, getting us to a correct space. Well, the teachers who do their job the best realize that there's no one correct answer in music. And there's a whole world on the other side of correct. And that other side of correct is all about connection. How do we connect students with the music? And then if we flip that equation and put connection first, something miraculous happens, that the notes and rhythms fall into place. And we've all been in those performances where we've left and we've said, It was clean. It was correct, but it didn't have heart. Our students need opportunities to connect to the music so it has heart. And then correct will get there.
Absolutely. So we're teaching the students, and we're talking about them in terms of their own social emotional learning and where they are. But really, for a lot of us, we're teachers. And David, I know that that's kind of the next place that we're going to go is how we do that for ourselves, and how do we do some self-care for teachers.
Yeah, and Scott, this is a great segue, I think, because you said something about whether we should start with the end in mind or start with the rigor, and I think what you just said as far as how the notes will fall into place. Start with the student in mind first. And I told my students that at the very beginning of this year. I said, look, we're going to have some that were 180 days at home behind a computer. And we had some that were half of that. And we had some that were 100% face-to-face last year. And I said, so we're going to have to teach to the middle this year. We're going to start at the middle, and the people at the bottom are going to have to work a little bit. And the people at the top are going to just have to be patient. And it's been a pretty amazing synchronization of watching students take care of one another. We've developed a mentor program out of it. And from that has really given me a new sense of what my role is in the classroom. Yeah, rigor is still important. And yeah, we still want to play Mozart. And yeah, we still want to play Cacciatorian and all the things. But at the same time, well, perfect example. I took my orchestras off campus today for the first time in 2 years, and we performed off campus for a group of business associates in our community. And they had a smile all the way over there. We performed, they had a smile all the way back, and they said, that was awesome. And most of those kids have not played a live concert in 2 years. So you start to see the little things really, really do add up. And it's maybe us taking our foot off the pedal and just turning the steering wheel a little bit and going in a different direction that maybe we've never gone. And that's really why we're going to talk about the teacher's perspective, because we have a myriad of people out there. We have the first year teacher, the second, third, fourth year teacher. We have some veteran teachers out there. As I mentioned, I'm in my 33rd year. And I can tell you, when I went back, I was at the university for 10 years and went back to the high school classroom, and right in the midst of a pandemic. I have never in my life had something as difficult to do. The transition, first of all, from being a band director, a wind conductor, to that of an orchestra director, 1, 2, right in the middle of a pandemic, and then going from teaching 22 and 23-year-old students to teaching 14 and 15-year-old students again after a 10-year hiatus of doing that. So I worry about our teachers. I worry about our profession. I worry about those that we're going to lose. Because even veteran teachers are walking off the job in the middle of the day. Don't care if it breaks a contract, doesn't care if it goes against ethics. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. And I worry about that for the future of our profession. And in a real sense, we as teachers, my dad was my motivation. Alfred Watkins was my motivation. They were both band directors, and to get to follow in their footsteps was amazing. And that's why I'm doing it. Do those teachers that are coming through, are they going to have those people, of veteran teachers, walk out of the profession? And that's a real concern about how that might be cyclically. Alfred and I go way, way back. I was actually a middle school feeder for him way back in, 1990, 91, 92. My daughter, Hannah, went through his program for 4 years. She graduated from Lassiter High School the same year that Alfred graduated from Lassiter High School. And so there's a very special connection with Alfred and I. So choosing him for this panel was an easy fix. Alfred, I want you to talk a little bit about the perspective of your career and all of the foot to the pedal as far as your balance of time and energy, family, and now if you throw a pandemic on top of it, what can you offer teachers of all ages and experience levels out there?
Thank you, David, for the intro, and it's been great to listen to the dialogue so far. And you're one of those teachers that should do more of these conversations and more leading of professional educators as to the things that are important, because you're one of the ones that have seen that have been that way from the very, very beginning. We've got challenges across the board that are pretty complex. And yet, if we can simplify them, it may make the complex easier to digest. One, it is my opinion that as music educators and as teachers, we're not really prepared to handle life after the last 18 to 20 months. We're not schooled at that, we're not trained at that, and we kind of guide each other. So my suggestion to people is try to avoid cliches and try to be a salmon that swims upstream. And the salmon that swims upstream doesn't follow along the lines of conventional wisdom. And when that happens, then we'll realize that it's all about the students individually that we work with, about those human beings. It's not about the band. The band's a collection of those students. And we've talked about it a lot for a long time, but I'm not so sure that band directors quite honestly believe it, David. I think that we kind of talk a talk, but we don't necessarily walk our walk. It takes courage to determine what your ensemble needs and what your students need. I'll give an example. We use first person singular in most of our conversations as children going all up into adulthood. Is I'd like to go off to a good college. I would like to do this. I'd like to become married. I'd like to have 2 kids and a dog one day. I'd like to do this. I'd like for my kids to do this. I'd like to find a significant other. I'd like to do this. I'd like to do this. And I want my own band one day, because right now I'm an assistant. I want my own rehearsal room, and I want to take my band to this event. And so we live in that first person singular for so much, we almost kind of believe ourselves. And it becomes difficult to serve others and to be the salmon and saying, you know what, I've heard that for so long. I would throw a little bit of a insight into my experience for the last 20 months. And I'm still close to the vest in terms of the pandemic. I'm still very cautious. I'm still waiting till the country gets back to herd immunity. And I can wait because I've lost too many friends, loved ones, and people in my church and people that I know and know of. And I've lost too many to take it for granted. But I want to challenge the listeners to realize that the last 20 months has been a period when we've had a troubled time that everyone can understand, but emotionally, we've also had a very difficult time. If you take the pandemic away, there are Black and brown students and people in our communities. Probably Latinx, African American, 31%. You have the 6% Asian Americans on top. It's a third of the American population that has been offended, defaced, insulted, killed, and faced with all kinds of political upheavals in their lives. And so as a result of that, at 67 years old, I'm a different person than I was at 64. I use my voice differently. I think of things differently. And the social interaction that my country has placed me in has put me in a completely different place. And I'm old enough and mature enough to handle it somewhat. I can't imagine being my sons. I can't imagine being a 15-year-old. And you put a pandemic on top of it. So my caution to the band directors is that the beauty of what we have right now, however, is that we have a chance to do it over again. We have a chance to not reboot, restart. It's almost like turning your computer off and then turning it back on, and you got to upload things back into it. So we get a chance as band directors to revisit who we really and truly are as people and as band directors, and not chase after what we think we're supposed to chase after because we've lived in the first person singular too long. I've done it. We've all kind of done it. That's my challenge to the teachers that are out there. I'll give you an example. We started the community band back up after 16, 18 months off. And at the end of the first rehearsal, it was a holiday. It's a holiday prep. In the first rehearsal, I said, okay, pull out Sleigh Ride. We played for 21 concerts. So we pulled out Sleigh Ride and played through it as the last little 3 minutes of a 2.5-hour rehearsal, having not seen each other for 18 months. And we played it down, played the little horse whinny at the end. It didn't go very well. And we ended Sleigh Ride, and the adult band of 108 members applauded and cheered. And it caught me off guard. I went like, are they cheering? And I looked around and I was kind of dazed. And I came back and I told my wife about it. And I went back 2 weeks later. I said, did you cheer at the end of Sleigh Ride? And the entire band said, yeah, we were that happy, Alfred, just to be back in the space. And so in that case, it's a cut and paste because of their age and things of the sort, but I'm not the same. And so my approach, and we were scheduled to play at the state in-service conference to do a sight reading session in January, an extra run-out concert. I canceled it about a week ago. I told them, just get through these rehearsals and let's just do this. And no, we're not playing at a conference anytime soon. Let's just put our community together with a new start, a new approach. And I get a chance now to revisit who I am as a musician, who I am as a person. And I think that's what we have to do, and seek professionals that are trained in the area to help us maybe discuss it with our students, because I know we're not trained.
Well, and I completely agree with you that, and that's the next point I really want to talk about is I found myself last year, and whether this is good or bad, I walked into a classroom up to last year teaching students. Last year, I walked into the classroom teaching children. And I think there's a big difference in that when you look that there's a human life sitting there that Lord knows what they have been affected by, you know, what was going on at their house. I had students that wouldn't turn their cameras on. And when they came back to school, they said, Mr. Starnes, I didn't want you to see what was going on at my house. I'm embarrassed of what goes on at my house. I could not turn my camera on. And those are the kinds of things where it was almost like, you know, back in the day, you put your children in timeout. They were in timeout for a year, still trying to go to school, trying to meet their benchmarks and achievements. But it's amazing to me that, you know, they came back face to face. And just like you said, Alfred, happier than ever to hear that first note of music again. It didn't matter how in tune it was. It didn't matter how together it was. It's the fact that they were human bodies. The same kind of experience happened to me. I did a clinic up in Kentucky for their Bandmasters Association in June of this year. And I took a piece to read with them, and they were all band directors in the room. About halfway through it, I just looked and everybody was crying. And I literally just stopped the band, and it was Richard Saucedo's With Each Sunset, which is a beautiful piece of music. And we just stopped, and I said, is everybody all right? And they were like, we haven't heard live music in a year, because Kentucky shut everything down for a year. And so that's the heart of the teacher that misses out on that connection. So my question is, for those of us that have always set, this year we will do, next year we will do, here's my 3-year plan, here's my 5-year plan. I want to play at the Midwest Clinic. I want to play at Grand Nationals. I want to play at the state conference. I want to get my master's while I'm teaching, whatever those things might be. How do we now look at students when we walk into the room and let it be okay inside us for that little voice to say, teach the child first, teach the student second?
It is challenging, and I agree with you. I think because it's a double-edged sword, I call it kumbaya bands. There's some groups that are just happy to be in the environment. And you'll see them at the national championship this year. And it'll be 27 kids on the field, because it was 27 last year. It'll be 27. They've gone every year forever. And you go on the field with them, and they just lack every skill in the box. But they're enthusiastic and they're happy to be there. That group. And then there's a social media band that band directors are fully aware of also. They know what kind of season DCI had this year. I didn't see the show, but I knew the cadets wore their old uniform. because I got it through the band director grapevine. And so you have these championships this weekend, and you have what can be a focal point for a program, unless the teacher wants to be the salmon. But you can't be a salmon and have Kumbaya band for 25 years because I learned something this morning. There was a lady that ran the Boston Marathon on Monday. She finished last. It took her 10 hours, I think, and 33 minutes to run the marathon. The winner won it in 3 hours and 3 minutes, I believe. Was it 2? Was it 2 hours? But it took her 10 hours and she finished last. So my notion was, now what if I taught both of those people in my classroom? One that is an Olympic champion that can run 26 miles, and another 33,000 people that chose to run 26.2 miles near the end of this pandemic. And this other one over here that wanted to finish the race and ran for 10 hours and a half. We teach both of those in our classroom, but they have different levels of how they envision success. And I think it's incumbent upon us, David, as we reinvent ourselves as teachers, to find a way to reinvent our organizations. But we can't just bring the band back. We can't do that because we'll lose them once again. And that's my suggestion is, so everyone finds they're happy in a different place, but in a classroom, there has to be, I think, some musical achievement and musical excellence. If not, then we're kind of losing the mission of being a music educator. And so we have to be creative to find new ways of creating our happy. Put them on a bus when this is calmed down and take them to a Troy University concert, or take them to an ASO concert, or take them to a Lake Forest concert, and you may never have done that before. And that's just doing two things. It's helping them with their social and their emotional growth, and it's also helping them to understand musical excellence.
I think those are all fantastic points. And you know, my grandfather used to say, you can skin a cat several different ways. And I think that's where we are with education right now. My colleagues in my area were pretty much shut down last year, and they're really struggling in numbers. They're struggling in excellence. They're struggling in comparing themselves to what they look like in 2019 to now. That's brutal. I just think it's a situation where we should not look at the past other than we know how to do it, but we're going to take what hand has been dealt us and move, like Alfred said, use different strategies, use different things that are motivators, use different things that are inspirations. And perhaps it's reinventing ourselves. I think, you know, with Tim here, I think DCI did that this summer. You know, everybody's like, throw the judges out, you know, who needs them? You know, look at the entertainment value. It was a completely rebranded DCI, which may have changed a lot of the way that we do things in that activity, as far as camps throughout the year and move-ins and how long the tour is. And Tim, you maybe from your perspective, what are your thoughts on that? You just saw the best groups in Texas, and you'll probably see some great groups in Grand Nationals next week, but you're going to see a complete spectrum, I'm sure, of what that might have affected groups with.
Yeah, the fall's been, I've been out every weekend, and some of those early September shows with 3 or 4 groups, which we turned into clinics and working with the kids. Goes back to what you guys have been talking about. It's about community. It's about connection. It's about creating something together. And we've all been isolated doing our own little thing. And you throw out that term, you know, that you have ensembles and you do classrooms. Well, yeah, in a classroom you can do one-on-one, but it's really something when you add that third, that fourth, that fifth person. And I think it's more than, you know, and you've all touched on it. It's that aspect of, you know, are we here to teach music, or are we really teach how to express yourself in a group of people? I'll give you an example. You know, COVID was an interesting thing, being, you know, in a medical center 24/7, always concerned about every little person from the standpoint, we went 14 months, the only institution in the state of Texas not to have an employee get COVID. We were the COVID institution for our region in Texas. And what was really interesting, when it got all down to the end after a year, I'd have so many people pull me over in the hallway and get in my space shorter than 6 feet and go, I was in the band when I was in high school. I played third clarinet, and it was really interesting. And people go, why are you still active in the activity? And I said, because when it comes down to, picking a surgical resident, it's like, oh, he was in the band when he was in high school. We want him. And it's that whole aspect that, like Alfred said, you played through Sleigh Ride. It didn't have who cared if the whinny was correct? It could have been a meow, but it was like, we just did this together. It's Music Man at the end, where, he's so nervous because the band's not good, but the other people that see the effect that the educator has on those children or on somebody they care about, they go, that's what was worth. And the issue is we were brought up into a system that was already functioning. The system stopped. We don't have a system. And so now we have to go back, and we're not going back, from, your grandfather or Alfred and going, well, here's the system. I'm now the new director there. Well, no, we took a hiatus. Now create your program. And it really starts with getting people engaged, involved, and whatnot. And I think you've all, David, I know that when you walked into that classroom, the aspect of, I'm going to make sure they know this, that was still in your mind. But the big thing was, I wonder who's in here. I wonder how they're doing and all that. And I think that's the big change, because that's not something that was in our wheelhouse. It was, the next performance is this. We want to do that. We want this grade. We want that kind of thing. And it's a different, we've taken that break. I mean, any of us that do anything, just lay in bed for a month and then try to get up and do anything. You're not going to do very well.
Well, and I think, you hit it on the head as far as going back into the classroom. For me, my goal last year was keep kids engaged and involved. So I had a program this year. And I know a lot of people last year that thought, well, we're not going to get behind. We're going to check all the boxes just like we always do. And a lot of those people that did their program like they had done it in years past, they really took a hit on numbers this year and involvement and engagement. So I think that's a great point. Tim, you're here for a lot of reasons, because you've got, the background and the music education part of it. And you've also, you're a brilliant doctor. But I want you to put at rest, maybe for teachers that are on our session tonight, there's certain things, my dad told me this one time and I'll never forget it. He said, control the things you can that you can control, and the things that you can't, learn to deal with them. And I think there are a lot of music educators right now that are forcing themselves to go above and beyond, and it could be even anti-healthy for them in terms of what they're doing to themselves for something they can't control. And can you offer some suggestion about maybe what stress and undue stress does on a person's physical health?
Yeah, there's a lot of musicians on the call today. So one of the things that most people don't do is they don't breathe. And so the 4-7-8 routine. We're used to other different things that we do from a musical standpoint, especially if you're a wind player. But from that standpoint, is every person should do that, which is take in the biggest breath you can through your nose in 4 counts and hold it for 7. And then exhale continuously for 8 counts, and then do that again, and then do that again. I can tell you my own personal thing, learning to do that routine when I was in cardiac rehab, was I could lower my blood pressure in the course of 2 minutes by 10 points.
Wow.
And so anytime I sort of like walking into a room and I go, oh, am I calm going into this room, or am I worked up on a certain situation, is I'll just take that brief moment. breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, and exhale. And doing that, you keep your tongue steady. There's no motion there. It's on the back. It's right behind your teeth up there on the ledge. And you breathe that in, you hold it, and then you exhale it. And you're not counting fast. You're nice and slow. Every breath, trumpet teacher would love, to be doing those things. But it's really eliminating that stressful aspect in it. One of the things that we sent out a poll of, our 250,000 University of Texas people was, you don't have to answer this question, but are you heavier after the pandemic, or are you better in shape after the pandemic? Because you had complete control, you are isolated, and where are you physically? And I can tell you the predominant is just, it's more like 3 out of 4 people are worse off today health-wise post-pandemic than they were pandemic beforehand. And they have a higher stress level, and they're carrying that extra 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds that they didn't have pre-pandemic. And the only way you get that is, it's, you just don't chop it off. It's you have to reverse those steps that you had to do that. So it's really taking care of, and the best educator can be is if you're not around to educate, then you're not doing the student or the child any good. So the best part, and Alfred and I've had this conversation for the last couple of years of just be the healthiest person that you can be. And you need to then go, and we talked about this earlier with Scott on it. It's not just, what did you eat? Well, how much did you sleep? What's your stress level? Did you exercise? Fitbits and Apple Watches have that thing, we throw it out there as, well, I sit at a desk all day. Oh, so you smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day. I never did say anything about smoking. I just said I sit at a desk for 8 hours a day. Well, it's the same equivalent on your body as if you smoke, because you haven't exercised, your blood flow slowed down. The damage to be that is, so it's really how do you better take care of yourself along those ways. And we all have different things. I mean, I judged 40 bands yesterday. We had the call to be at the stadium at 6:30 in the morning. We got out of there at 10 o'clock at night. Not my normal. It's just like Tom Brady. Ask him to play football on a night game, he'll lose. So that's why he always gets the thing. They only play in the afternoon because then he's guaranteed to win, because he goes to bed at 8:30 every day. I mean, he does that. He eats a certain thing. He really watches his stress. He does his exercises through those things. He does that breathing. And it's not that you eliminate, you can't say, well, I just won't do any of these things. Hey, Christmas is coming. There's going to be some cookies. I'm going to eat a cookie, but it's not like, well, but I have Oreos every day. It's like, I haven't had a cookie in, 3 months, but man, Christmas is coming. Thanks. My in-laws go, Tim doesn't eat any animal products. You think I'll have turkey at Thanksgiving? My wife goes, well, maybe if it's like really good, he might try some, And it's just, because there's those times. I'll see you this weekend. We might have to have a bourbon or, some adult beverage that in a different time we would have partaked at a different level. Now it'll be just, it'll be more of the conversation. It'll be more that interplay, of how you doing, what's really going on in your life and whatnot. I suggest that all educators have a mentor on both ends. If you've been teaching for 5 years, you should know somebody that you talk to on a weekly basis that's way ahead of you in the activity, and you should have somebody that's starting out. You shouldn't just have I have a mentor. It's like, yeah, and I'm also mentoring, and it's like, well, what do you know how to mentor if you already have a mentor? Well, you're putting it right back into action. Going, I don't know the answer to that, but I was just engaged in that, 2 years ago. You're where I was at this time. And to just have that conversation and not from the standpoint of, especially for the men on the call, we're fixers. We don't want to get into that whole emotional aspect of where we're trying to get to. We just want to go, what's the problem? Okay, do this. It's fixed. Let's go on to the next thing versus, I'll never forget the day that I thought I was going to get fired at MD Anderson. I was called to surgery. I went flying down the hall. I saw one of my patients and I said, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, how are you doing? She goes, I'm doing really awful. And I sat down next to her And 12 hours later, crying with her family and going through the whole thing, I was like, holy crap, I don't know what happened in surgery. I'm a big doo-doo. And for the rest of the week, nobody talked to me. And it was like, are you guys mad at me? What's going on? And they're like, no, we just knew you had something busy, more important to do. And it was that aspect of, that caring. And I think that's where music educators are. They're the guy, they're the Mr. Opus, they're the person in the school, because a football coach, everybody hates him. He makes a lot of money and he just yells at everybody all the time. And he's going to take a different job anywhere else. But the band is a place where, you go into. I mean, I can tell you here at UIL in Texas last week, one of the small groups, 100 group, this is 1A, 103 kids in the high school, 82 in the band.
It's amazing.
It was, and it was like Alfred said, they made a few good sounds. They did some stuff, but they play 7-man football. They have a couple cheerleaders, and every kid in the school is on Friday night is either on the field playing football or a cheerleader or in the band or doing the band and the football together. But it's that piece of it that's really key. And I think that we burn the candle at two ends, just going on from the standpoint about not only taking care of the student, but we have to take care of ourselves because we got to stick around.
Well, and I think, that there's a lot of veteran educators out there right now that are probably really identifying with what you're saying, because you can get your head so deep in the sand and then one day you look up and you've done something, physically to yourself or mentally to yourself that now you're a different person. And I can remember getting in those places, but there's a special bond in Alfred Watkins and Tim Ochran that I've asked them to share with us in our last 4 minutes or so. Alfred, like I said, has been a dear friend of mine, and he went through something personally, and Tim was a big part of that. And so to wrap this thing kind of 360 with the student perspective and the teacher perspective and why we need to take care of ourselves. Alfred, do you want to share a little bit about what you went through?
Sure. Well, as many people may know, I'm a former cancer patient. My cancer, I don't like to use the word in remission, but I don't have any cancer anymore. And one of my first phone calls was to Tim Ochran, and to get some advice from a person who knew a lot more about it than I did. And as you can tell with this conversation with regards to general wellness, he saved my life. He gave me the best advice that a person could give me in my situation. And I followed his advice to a T. So the 2 tumors that I had are gone. I'm healthy, I'm emotionally healthy, I'm physically healthy. And what he did for me, in addition to giving me good medical advice with regards to radiation and helping me find just the right doctors, and insisted that I find the correct hospital. There was no bones about it. He didn't miss any words. But I had a mentor that was a professional that helped me through every step of the way. And what he was doing in the interim, he'd send me a text between surgeries. So you doing okay, man? At 2:00 in the afternoon. And I sent him this long diatribe of information that was happening back. And at the end of it, he said, yeah, you'll make it. And then I sent him a note about a month later. You doing okay? He said, well, I'm struggling a little bit myself right now. I'm looking forward to the beach. So we kind of went back and forth with regards to seeing the greener pastures in the world that we were in at the time. And I'm a completely different human being that I was, and much of it is because of having a health wellness mentor that I didn't ask for. I just asked him for some advice. So when he mentioned to you as teachers about how to find having mentors, you kind of don't have to ask someone, would you be my mentor? Just call them or text them. And the notion is that, well, David Starnes, Susan Smith, Scott Edgar, they don't have time for me. And the answer is yes, they do. We're all dying to help people improve the quality of their life on a regular basis. And so we all are here to help answer those questions. And if you send us an email and we don't answer and if I send Tim an email and he didn't answer that day, I say, well, he's probably sitting down with someone, talking to him on the side of the bed for 12 hours. He'll get back with me. And there he was 2 or 3 days later, sent me the note and said, I was helping some patients that were getting in cardiac arrest. So if we don't answer immediately, we'll get it. We'll get back to it. And I'll send us a reminder. There's nothing wrong with a reminder. The bill collectors don't hesitate in sending second reminders and third reminders, and they're actually pretty beneficial. So so find yourself a band director mentor or mentors, and find yourself a wellness mentor, but don't find someone that thinks like you. Don't find that person. Find someone like my wife, we've been married for 38 and a half years now, who can't read music. So when I go upstairs, I'll tell her what we talked about, and she'll say, I told you. And she's a really good balance to things that I do. But don't find someone like yourself. That's just repeating you. You don't want that. And that's really important for everyone to know. Find someone that will be your opposite, that will help you navigate your way through how to see things. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. Thank you for making the call. I think you're a little nervous when I said, okay, and I'll call you back in a couple days. And then I'll call you back in a few more days. I think I think on that original call, you were like, I'm just going to get some advice and we'll hang up the phone and be done. And for the folks here, it has been a constant friendship, check in. How's it going? What's going on? What about this? Okay. And sometimes I've given you a little push. Well, are you doing this? And you'll go, why? What do you mean? What do we? Or when you started the band, you said, how many people do you think I can really put in a room at one time? And, how close should we be together?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about being vaccinated and how that, or, those different things. So, but I do think it's a mentoring time. I think that we were not, and Alfred, you brought it up with the whole I world. I mean, I until I was 21, I didn't know me, you, they, them. It was only I, that world, for me, and it's just really different to put other people first, and I think that's the drive, and I think really is I think we really need to look at the community in a whole. When I'm talking about the musical activity, is what are we really trying to do as, and I consider myself a music educator. I get put on panels to come in as a consultant, and they usually go, well, what do you do? And I go, I'm just here. And sometimes that's really what it's about. It's about that last chair trumpet that you talked about. He's just happy to be part of the group. And, and I suggest to every band director out there is you probably have a retired band director in your community. Invite him to a rehearsal. And don't worry, he might just sit in a chair and just enjoy being in the chair. I mean, I do it with physicians on campus and such, but I think, and then you need to invite the young guy who doesn't have time and just say, why don't you come to my rehearsal tomorrow? Or why don't you come? I'm doing this or that, and venture that out. And I think that support piece will go. I do think that Scott brought it up in the very beginning. I think we lost a lot of kids. I don't think they know what's out there because they've not been part of, the school activity. They haven't seen these things. It's all been videos. It's all what's on the phone or on TV. And it's not been that portion where we've been active with everybody else. But just, David, you're talking about closing. I think as we do nobody any justice unless we take care of ourselves first, which is just making sure, are we the best that we can be so that when that interaction comes, are we ready to be, how can I help you, versus I was on my way to go do this. This is what I need to be doing. And I think that's key. I think that's key. and be prepared to interrupt your time, because Johnny's third valve is just stuck on that trumpet and he hasn't been taking care of it. Has anybody really shown him how to take care of it?
Great point.
I'll leave with one last thing. A very big, Broken Arrow went to their first football game back in the beginning of the fall. And they get to the school, they have their schedule. It's the whole thing, they tour all over the country. No big deal, blah, blah, blah. They couldn't get out of the parking lot. 70% of their kids have never been on a trip. How the heck do you load a bus? How do you load the equipment truck? And it was a disaster. So the next Saturday, when there was an all-day rehearsal, what did they learn to do that rehearsal? They learned how to pack and unpack. Nothing on the field, nothing of that. But it bonded them so well because they had so few people that knew how to move the organization. And I think we're back to having to take a step back and do those things. And it just goes back to, David, when we were talking about it, just goes back to breathing. Yep. It's like, geez, I learned that, in fourth grade with my trumpet teacher. And here I have, my cardiac rehab person going, so tell me how you do your breathing. Do you do breathing exercises? I used to, but I don't do them anymore. Well, why not? You could reduce your stress.
Isn't it crazy? It's lesson learned. Just don't take anything for granted.
I say a class, I said, I know most of you probably, or some of you have read the book, everything that I learned in kindergarten. It's like my life and my professional life for sure has been everything I've learned that's been important into my life. I learned by being in the band. And I think that's why this was so key when you called and said, I'd like you to be involved with this. Is I think the most key educator in the school systems in our country, in the US, is the band director. And I use that term not correctly, is the music educator, because they're the one that's teaching the most life skills on how to go through the rest of your life out of anybody else in the school. That's my own personal opinion. And I can tell you from success of hiring people, I haven't hired a lot of first chair all-staters in my time in the medical business, but I've hired a lot of people that just were that last chair trumpet player that marched in the Kitsky band or marched in, Broken Arrow or Lake Park or Riverside or, whatever, you name the group. And they go back to those things that you guys teach.
Well, the pandemic has certainly taught all of us not to take things for granted. And that's something that we try to do every day. So we want to thank all of you for being with us. Music for All's mission is to create, provide, and expand positively life-changing experiences through Music for All. Our vision is to be a catalyst to ensure that every child across America has access and opportunity to participate in active music making in his or her scholastic environment. We want to thank our guests, Scott Edgar, Tim Ochran, and Alfred Watkins, for being with us this evening. We'd also like to thank our national presenting sponsor, the Yamaha Corporation of America. Be sure to check out the Yamaha Educator Suite at yamahaeducatorsuite.com. And before we sign off, we want to say how grateful Music for All is to have the opportunity to be back together again in the Bands of America Championships after 22 months of not being able to hold in-person events. As we go into Grand Nationals next week, everything has just been fantastic to be at these regionals and to be back together. Ticket sales and event-related revenue from these events have historically sustained our organization year-round, serving more than 150,000 students and teacher participants each year. We thank our dedicated donors for their continued support and generosity, which helped Music for All sustain through these times, through the pandemic, and made it possible for our return to live events.
Hard work and recovery and rebuilding is not yet done, everyone. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, which we hope you have, I've just been greatly inspired by the whole thing. And for us to continue to provide these free educational resources and advocacy materials, please consider a donation of Music for All at any amount. Your gift allows us to serve our mission with future educational programming such as this webinar. Please visit musicforall.org/give to help Music for All thrive and provide positively life-changing experiences for many years to come by becoming a donor today. And finally, remember both our Mind the Gap and Teaching Social and Emotional Learning Through Music, Dr. Scott Edgar, series are available as podcasts. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. Speaking of episodes, our Grand National Championships are this week. On November the 30th, Susan and I will do another podcast webinar on the positivity and the healthiness of competition. You don't want to miss that one as we wrap up the fall marching band season after being dormant for a year. And then Susan and I are going to be together at the Midwest Clinic in the Music for All booth on December the 16th, doing a live Facebook for anyone who's at Midwest. Drop by, see us, and make sure you introduce yourself to us. You might even wind up on a Facebook Live if we like you enough. So please drop by and say hello. We'll be there live. For Music for All, I'm David Starnes.
And I'm Susan Smith.
Thank you all, everyone. Good night and stay safe. Good night.
Take care.